WBNE.
Hello and welcome to episode 75, all about Two Towers, Theatrical Edition, Part 5, being the 75th part of That's What I'm Talking About. Oh my god, guys, we're at the quarter quell. Hello, my name is Mary Clay. If that's too complicated for you, just call me MC. And today I'm joined by my gal pals of the restricted section, Christina Khan. I almost said Catherine Simpkis because that's what you're... Haley Simpkis and Brooke Matherly. Welcome, everyone.
Hello.
Hi.
How are you?
Listeners, this is a first because I've never had this many people on before. We will see what happens.
You'll hear the difference.
It's a mistake.
In the...
It's definitely a mistake starting with the three of us.
No, this is not a mistake at all. I did this because I got feedback during a listener survey that I did. Plot twist, people like you guys. What?
Still can't figure that
Sounds
one out.
fake.
It's because they don't know us.
That's true.
And yes, this is true. And they're like, have more restricted section on. And I was like, okay, well, this will be perfect for a movie episode. I'll get as many restricted section folks on as possible. So here we are. So why don't we go round the room really quick and tell me what you guys, what your memories were of watching. Brooke, actually, I think you shared your memories of watching the movies with that diary entry before, but you could talk a little bit more about. But so tell me, what were y'all's experiences with watching the movies for the first time?
Well, aside from my very embarrassing diary, so that was my first viewing of Fellowship was like alone in my friend's bedroom, and then past that my whole family got really into it, and the movies would release in theaters around this time of year basically, and we had a family policy of going the day after Christmas to see the new Lord of the Rings movie.
Aw, I love that.
So the final two we saw the day after Christmas, and by we, it was me, my dad, my sister. My mom refused to go. She is the kind of person that needs to get up 9 to 20 times an hour in order to get through a movie. And so the theater did not work well for her for a 3-hour film.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Haley, what about you?
I must have been like 10 or 11. I don't really remember the first time I saw Two Towers, but I do think that Two Towers was like the first of the Lord of the Rings movies that I saw. Like, I think before that I was too like young and stupid, and I was like, these are boring. But then like I saw Two Towers, and like Faramir was hot, and there was a dope war scene, and I was like, oh, this is really good. This is really, I can get behind this. And then I did, and now I'm me.
The beginning of the end.
Truly.
And Christina?
So I have told this story on your podcast on my first appearance, but I'm going to repeat it because it's a precious memory for me.
It's also, I remember this, but it has been a while since you shared this. So yes, go ahead.
Yeah. So my first introduction to literally anything in the world of Lord of the Rings, my very first introduction ever, was that I got invited by my 6th grade boyfriend, Alex, to go to the movies. And I was like, that sounds fun. And his mom managed to convince my mom to let me go with Alex and his best friend, Alex. And I'm not making that up.
Wait, I didn't know that this was this was a date with a third wheel.
We needed supervision.
That's so funny.
So if
like
the parents aren't
Duggars?
going to go, then you have to send the super nerdy best friend. And so the movie, I was like, I'll see any movie for you, first boy who's ever paid any attention to me. And it was the Two Towers. So not only did I not have an interest in this universe, but also it was the second installment. I had missed 3 hours of exposition that comes beforehand.
Yeah.
So I was really lost the whole time. Luckily, Alex is hilarious and really familiar with the series and probably had already seen the movie once by the time we got there and was whispering to me the whole time really funny things. And every time this is my main memory, is every time they showed a shot of Aragorn, Gimli, and Legolas, he would lean over and go, rub-a-dub-dub, 3 men in a tub. Because we were 11, and that was hilarious.
What do you mean? It's hilarious now.
I have an important clarification question. Did you sit what was the seating order? Did they Alex sandwich you, or were you like relegated to the outside?
Alex was in the middle, and Alex and me were on the outside.
Wait, Alex. Wait, which Alex?
My boyfriend, Alex.
Boyfriend?
Yeah. Which, by the way, he was too scared to admit he was my boyfriend back then, but now as adults, it's like, yeah, you were my boyfriend. He gave me a giant teddy bear for Christmas. What do you think?
Oh, yeah.
Aww.
legit.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so hilarious. Rub-a-dub-dub.
It's like it does. I'm like, I already don't. Sure, that doesn't make any. None of this makes any sense to me. That joke is totally lands.
Woo! All right, so we are here to do the Battle of Helm's Deep. That is the majority of the content for the following 30 or 40 minutes of film that we will be discussing.
I think it's worth noting up top that none of us, I don't think, have ever seen the theatrical edition since it was in theaters.
Yeah, I watched the extended editions or literally nothing.
Sean had a hard time downloading it.
Oh, I wish you guys had told me that you were trying to download it or something, because I got it on DVD.
No, I know. It was we literally, Haley and Brooke rolled up to my house to watch this, and we were like, I think we're supposed to watch this theatrical edition. Oh, Shire. Where do we even get this?
I wish you had texted me. I 100% would have come out to meet you with the DVD.
Oh, well, bless
Some
you.
black market DVD. It's like a drug deal, but with the Lord of the Rings DVD.
We got it. But we were like, what even is what's the difference? What are we doing here? I have no memory of this place.
So I suppose you guys are the main reason why I've been getting all this hate about covering the theatrical edition.
Oh yeah, when you've been talking about the hate mail, you didn't mention that 80% of it has been from me personally.
No, I haven't gotten like hate comments, and very few of them have actually been by y'all, but there are a lot of people who are very passionate about extended versus theatrical. And that's why every time I've been messaging my guests, I feel stupid doing it, but y'all saying like, oh right, we're supposed to do theatrical edition just gave me like, oh, I should keep doing this. I'm always like, we're doing theatrical edition. I'm only emphasizing this because extended edition is very different. So please watch theatrical edition.
So the real reason people get so offended is because the theatrical editions were a mistake. There was a misunderstanding that people were not interested enough to watch the full extended editions. And what has actually occurred is that the extended editions are the only ones worth watching.
No. Let's talk about one of my biggest pet peeves about Two Towers in Return of the King and the length that they do and the reason why there's so much cut out. And it all comes down to this battle. And it's the reason why everyone, listeners, they all just sat backwards like, oh my Lanta.
Heavens.
Where do I even begin? The entire structure of Two Towers is off because they centered all of it around Helm's Deep being the climax of the movie. Is it cool? Yes. Is it very triumphant and it's a good movie? Yes. Does it make for a great adaptation from the book? No, because what happens is so much stuff gets cut in Return of the King that should have been in there, that could have been in there had they moved, because Helm's Deep, need I remind listeners, this is where we are at the end of Two Towers movie, is mid Two Towers book in both of the plot lines for Aragorn and co. and Frodo and co. That is the middle of Two Towers. And so the reason Return of the King is so long, and the reason that so much stuff still was cut, and that's why people are like, the extended editions are better. I don't know why, but I just had an out-of-body experience remembering the dude from Shrek going, pick number 3, my lord. Whatever.
Guys, aren't you so proud of Mary Clay that she can go on rants about Lord of the Rings now?
I really do feel like a proud mother.
Yeah,
Look
like
at
she's
you.
doing it.
Look at you.
I'm not done. So so it also comes down to, so the reason, so Helm's Deep, they make that the climax of the movie. Because of that, they have to extend out the other plot lines of the movie unnecessarily. So therefore you have Treebeard's plot line being cut up into 1-minute scenes that you see every 40 minutes. And it's so dumb because as soon as you start getting into the scene with Treebeard, it cuts away again. And you're like, I don't care about Gollum. Just give me the ints, please. please, for the love of God.
That's my favorite thing about the theatrical edition is, I mean, I only had to spend like 5 minutes with Frodo and Sam, dude. I barely even had to think about them.
That's true. And you also have to extend out the things that happen with Frodo and Sam with Faramir. And so because they had to extend out the stuff with Faramir, they had to completely change his character from the book. There was a fun fact trivia that I shared in the previous episode about how Peter Jackson thought he knew better than Tolkien and was like, Peter Jackson believed that it wasn't actually in the character of Faramir to resist the ring. So he changed it. Did I just black out?
She's making herself sick with rage.
Did I just black out?
Well, it's also important to remember that these plot lines were not happening in tandem to the reader in the books. So if they could have been very different lengths in the books and you wouldn't really notice because they're not going back and forth the way a movie has to. It's like, let's just struggle through the wilderness with Frodo and Sam for 100 years. God, I just was like, can I skip all of it? And the answer is yes, you can skip all of it. They get there. They just pick back up in the secret tunnel.
Exactly.
Also, I mean, the sheer number of shots of Frodo's face that already exist in this film,
Jesus Christ.
There could have been no more. There need be no additional shots of Elijah Wood with like one eye half closed, just
and like fluttering slightly.
I would let it rest with every adult watching that movie knows exactly what kind of a face he's making, and to the kids, he just looks like he's having a little bit of a hard time.
He's about to sneeze.
Yeah, he's total about to sneeze face.
About to sneeze. That's it. Exactly.
Eyelids fluttering. He faints like Harry Potter. That's it. I kept being reminded of Harry Potter, just fainting.
Are you sure it's not just because of Elijah Wood and Daniel Radcliffe being almost identical?
It's both.
Like nearly identical, yeah. Okay, and then the other unnecessary thing, I'm still on this.
She's in her rant still.
The other unnecessary thing about Two Towers is that, you don't extend out Faramir's plotline, and you don't extend out Treebeard and the other stuff so that Helm's Deep is the climax. That means you also get rid of the dumb Aragorn's fake out death plot. I get that it was the only way to give Arwen something to do, but it wasn't in the books, and it added a good 15 minutes to the movie.
Drama.
You don't need it.
You're right.
The only reason you need it is so he can look wet when he shows up at Helm's Deep and pushes the doors open.
That moment in and of
That's
itself
important.
justifies the entire 15
important.
minutes. He literally, we watched the movie together. We rewound that scene and watched it again.
I did too.
Yeah, and we screamed. I'm with you that his almost dying scene is stupid. And what makes it worse to me is when he gets to Helm's Deep and everyone's like, "Oh, you're alive." And then Éowyn oh no, that's after the war actually, that she runs up to him and cradles him. Well, I'll just bring that up right now. There's this scene that I guess is unrelated to what we're talking about, I'm realizing right now, where Éowyn runs up to Aragorn because he survived the battle, spoiler alert, and she's happy, and it bothers me that they don't make out, also they don't stay away from it needs to be. It's in the middle. It's you should have kissed him. I would have kissed him. I don't care if you're betrothed. I'm gonna kiss you, dude.
And it looks reciprocated on both ends. It's not just, Éowyn it's a one-sided unrequited thing. It looks reciprocated on both ends because it looks like Aragorn is a husband coming home from war to his wife and that they are about to kiss.
Okay, I really didn't mean to jump us off track.
That's okay.
Well, that actually does bring me to a little trivia thing about the movies. There was in the original script for Two Towers, there was supposed to be a whole thing with Arwen was supposed to roll up with the elves, and so they had to recut a couple of scenes, when Aragorn first comes back and Legolas gives him his pretty necklace. That was originally apparently supposed to be Arwen, and that's why that scene now looks kinda gay. Just a little bit.
Ooh, I love it.
It looks like Éowyn runs up she's about to jump into his arms, and then she sees him talking to Legolas, and Legolas gives him the necklace back, and it's the look on her face is oh, that's what's going on.
Oh, they're in love. Oh, Legolas is the elf he's in love with. Oh.
I could do entirely without 100% of the Aragorn Éowyn flirting that happens in this film. Both long, lusty looks and a lot of gentle hair stroking at multiple points.
Yes.
Maybe if they had real chemistry, but they don't have chemistry.
I think they have chemistry.
Yeah, are you kidding? I think
she just is
they
literally
laugh-
like the equivalent of like a white, wet washcloth to me.
Oh.
Christina really
I'm not
hates
a
the
fan.
actress
Wow.
that plays Eowyn. I personally
I'm
disagree.
not a huge fan of her.
Brie
but
Larson for Eowyn 2020.
Yes.
Now that would be dope.
Christina shared that last week on Instagram, and I immediately am on board for that.
Or like even like a Keira Knightley, just someone with presence. I don't know a lot of actresses. But
No.
just someone.
Now, here's the thing, though. I had a dream where this was before I started watching the movies. I had a dream. It was actually in the lead up to me watching the movie. So this was like pre-movie anxiety dreams that Keira Knightley played Eowyn, but she changed nothing about the way that she acted as Elizabeth Swann.
I remember you telling that story.
I mean, that kind of works.
No, it didn't. It was terrible. It was god awful. And she butchered the "I am no man" scene.
She
it
would be
was bad.
whispering "Will," which is not the right name.
She was like, I'm doing the under
the teeth
underbite.
Oh yeah,
Oh, I don't like that.
yeah. I don't like that.
Yeah,
But in defense of my argument, Brie Larson would have just been like, "I'm no man." Like she would have just like so matter of factly. It wouldn't have been like this great dramatic thing. It would have just been like, "I'm Brie flippity dippin' Larson, and I am here to kill you."
Love her. Okay, and then one more thing about the structure that I swear we will talk
No,
talk
you're
about
doing great.
is that if you take out all the other stuff I was screaming about earlier, then you have room to move Shelob's lair up to Two Towers movie. You have room to move, which was cut from theatrical Return of the King, and it's extended edition only, as I understand it. You can leave in the things that happen with Saruman in Isengard. They completely cut all of that from theatrical edition Return of the King, that's like the one thing that I'm really confused about. And you move all of that up to Two Towers movie, and you end Two Towers movie like how it ends in the book, with Gandalf and Pippin riding off to Isengard dramatically after the Palantir, and you have Sam being like, "Oh, I f***ed up," and Frodo was kidnapped because he was actually alive. And
Good thing
thought
I
he
didn't
was
throw
dead.
him off that cliff. That's my favorite part.
Yeah.
He's like, "Should I throw him off a cliff?" And then he's
No.
like, "Wait,
just leave
I
him.
don't have enough time."
So that's my rant on the structure of Two Towers. I should say for now, because I'm sure it will come up again later.
It's funny that the premise of your rant is screw Helm's Deep, and that's what we came here for.
Yeah, so all of you. All that being said, this part of the movie is really dope.
It is
It
really
is
dope.
so dope. It's the only war scene I've ever cared about in my life.
I personally like the Battle of Pelennor Fields better, but I do, if I was just watching this as a movie and I had no idea what happened in the book, I would be like, yeah, that's a great movie.
That
Yeah.
makes sense. I just think it's like so cinematographically spectacular. Like,
And it's worth noting that I do think the vast majority of people, especially in our generation, that are familiar with Lord of the Rings did watch the movies first. I know very, very few
Yeah,
people who came
yes.
to the books first.
What do you mean people didn't wait until they were 25 and then started a podcast where they read the books for the first time and then watched the movies?
I read the books first, but that's because I'm a freaking nerd.
Nerd.
Yeah.
I mean, I watched the movies first because when the movies were coming out, I was in like early middle school kind of years.
What do you mean you weren't reading Tolkien?
I mean,
then? Come
I
on.
ended up reading it after the second movie, I think. I started reading the books, but it really was a thing where it's like, it's a lot to commit to as a young person, and you kind of have to,
I'm
you
aware.
have to want to do it.
Yeah, I couldn't do it. Like, I've always been a really advanced reader, but I wasn't, like, emotionally or intellectually ready for Lord of the Rings until I was in my 20s.
Mm-hmm.
I enjoyed it at the time that I read it, but I don't think that I ever would have been talked into reading it had I not seen
Yeah.
the movies first.
True.
Film makes stuff very cool. You know how nerdy Game of Thrones was before HBO got their hands on it? That was stuff that, like, your friend's nerdy dad read.
But the same thing with Lord of the Rings. Lord of the Rings existed prior to the movies in this like weird underground subculture of like a 100% crossover. Like it as a Venn diagram, it's just a circle of dudes who played D&D and guys who liked Lord of the Rings. And that was the entire fandom.
Yeah, totally. I understand all of that because I also, I was reading it for a podcast, and even sometimes I was like, I don't want to do this. This is a lot of
No, for sure.
This is a lot of words that I don't understand.
But as a movie, it's so entertaining. like start to finish,
Yes.
all three of them, but particularly Two Towers is my favorite because of Helm's Deep being fun as hell to watch, man.
I also think it really helps in the translation from these books to these films in particular is that 17 pages of Tolkien's luxurious landscape descriptions can be captured in one dope shot of New Zealand.
Of New Zealand, exactly.
And it's like so much more effective.
Yeah.
You're like, oh my god, look at that landscape.
Yeah, like when you first, I know this is before like the part that we're talking about, but like when you first see the Meduseld and it's like this sweeping shot with like heroic music. In the book, that's like 3 pages of description of like the ancient kings of the mead hall.
The funniest thing about Helm's Deep and the descriptions and everything, so the chapter of Helm's Deep in the book is maybe 8 pages. The actual battle is maybe 3 pages. The majority of that chapter is him describing what Helm's Deep looks like. I still had no idea what was going on. I was like, I was like, I think it's a castle. I'm imagining Bowser's castle in Mario Kart.
You're like, it's my only reference of castles.
This is Bowser's castle, so.
It's either Bowser's Castle or Hogwarts. Which one is it?
Either way, keep an eye on the pipes.
That's pretty good, Haley.
For a fortress, like it's pretty pregnable, like in terms of the amount of ways to get into it. There are a lot, it seems to me.
And there's that one scene when Theoden's like, this is basically impregnable except for this one little
mistake.
pipe that probably it's like the freaking Death Star. It's like, yeah, and that's going to be the error through which you get ruined.
Except in the movie, he's like, oh, there's this one little like storm drain. You'd barely even notice it. And then you see it takes like a full grown like Uruk-hai, like it's giant.
It's very big.
It's
large.
very big.
It's essentially a door.
Yeah. It's not small.
No.
Yeah, it's very... I mean, that's a classic example of... Theoden probably heard at the last minute that there's like something... He doesn't know. He hasn't seen it. He's the king. He walks around, he gets people to tell him stuff, and last minute someone runs up and is like, yo, my lord, okay, this just came to my attention, but there's a big hole, there's like a sewer in this fortress, and he's like, okay, like, do you think this is an issue? And the guy can like hear the orcs approaching, and he's like, no, it's probably fine.
So I'm gonna combat that real quick and say, first of all, it's actually Wormtongue who talks about this, and he's telling Saruman. And then I will say that when they're building Helm's Deep, they probably weren't imagining that a wizard sometime in the future was going to invent a bomb.
Yeah, true. Like they don't really do gunpowder yet.
Bombs aside, the forces of Saruman had like unending siege weapons. Our heroes having literally just swords and bows and arrows. They had nothing.
Yeah, they had 2 different kinds of siege ladders.
Yeah.
2 different kinds.
And like giant
pretty cool.
crossbow bolts and all kinds of stuff.
We're gonna jump into the discussion now, because otherwise we'll be here forever. I love y'all, and I love this.
Oh God, we didn't start that yet. Oops.
I forgot that she does it chronologically.
Suspense is building at Helm's Deep as Saruman's army approaches. The skies open up with rain so that Aragorn can be wet again, and so it begins. The Uruk-hai have war technology the likes of which Rohan has never seen, such as ladders, double-wide ladders, and more ladders. We get a not-so-subtle Wilhelm scream, Gimli and Legolas start a competition, and children are throwing rocks with somewhat surprising accuracy. Over on the ever-slow-moving Merry and Pippin side of the story, Treebeard and the Ents decide during the Entmoot that the hobbits are not orcs. That's great and all, but oi, there's a war going on! Now let's not be hasty. The Ents will discuss that next on their Entmoot agenda. 17! 18! In Helm's Deep, Legolas is winning their competition. Too bad we can't really say the same thing about Rohan. Theoden just has to jinx everything right as an Uruk-hai brings the Olympic torch to the one weakness in Helm's Deep. Theoden's confidence blows up right in his face. Literally. Legolas shield surfs into action to help his buddies as the battle continues. The Ents have finally come to a decision. They're not getting involved with the war. Crap. They're like your uncle who posts too much on Facebook about how COVID is a hoax until he personally tests positive. Treebeard tells Merry and Pippin that their part of the journey is over and they should head back to the Shire. Pippin's excited to return home, but Merry explains that if they don't put a stop to the war, then there won't be a Shire to go home to. Just spitballing here, but it might be that all of the Shire's nature is destroyed, everyone is forced to export their weed and crops, leaving nothing for themselves, and a corrupt police force takes over until the hobbits return to lead an uprising that ends with Saruman getting his throat cut and Frodo defunding the police. The reality of the situation finally hits Pippin just as some concerning hobbits comes in to punch you in the gut. Okay, so first I want to start off with what Haley brought up earlier about Arwen and original plans to have her included here. I've tried to track down what the actual story is for what I'm about to share. So originally, there was plans to have Arwen be with the elves as they roll up to Helm's Deep. One trivia fact says that they hadn't started filming it. One trivia just says Liv Tyler had even begun to train when the decision to remove her was made by the writers, who realized this approach wasn't working. She was ultimately rewritten into Two Towers using stories from the appendices. So that's one story. Another one in the DVD extras says that it got leaked onto one of the main fan sites that Arwen was going to be at the Battle of Helm's Deep, and it was met with a lot of negative feedback, aka mansplainers. And then it also, there's this whole article I found on the onering.net about differences from the book to movie. This comment said, it appears that scenes of Arwen fighting at Helm's Deep were filmed, but Peter Jackson decided not to use them. And then the sub meaning of that is that she wasn't good in these scenes, so they cut them. And then one more added layer to this that I still don't know what the true story is. This is a quote from Peter Jackson. He said, "We had to find a way to include Arwen in more of the story to have a chance at creating a meaningful screen romance." And so that was why they tried to include her in the battle.
Yeah, be sure to get women in there for the romance and definitely not for representation in their own right.
Well,
Okay.
I get what he meant, that they were we have Éowyn who is out here fighting and doing so. Let's show Arwen doing stuff and show that Arwen and Aragorn have that alike as well. So that's the end of this random story that I still don't really know what the truth is, but it comes down to she was removed because of sexism.
So in my heart, I know it to be true that Liv Tyler could not pull off these scenes, dude. She sucks. I get it that she's ethereally beautiful, and that's because she's never done one flippin' second of work a day in her life. I don't think she could execute a single action sequence for 1 second, dude. I don't think she has it in her. And I don't buy that Peter Jackson would take fan opinions into anything having to do with his films.
Interesting.
Yeah, Peter Jackson is notoriously does not care about that kind of stuff, because if he did, the Hobbit series wouldn't exist.
Yeah.
Oh,
I think it was the equivalent of my mom being like, "Can your husband come mount the TV in my house?" And Sean's like, "I want to see you try first." And it's just my mom hitting the wall with a wrench. I think, and then Sean's like, nah, don't get out of here. I'm just gonna hang this for that's what I truly feel like it was like.
Mm-hmm. So.
I wish that the women in this movie were better.
I know, we all wish it, but we're never gonna get it.
Even the terrible characters we're
not gonna get it.
They could have been cast better. They just do better. Kate Blanchett can't carry it on her own.
She's barely in this thing.
As one positive of casting, I actually really like the variety of ages of soldiers and children and women that we had in this scene, because it really did a good job of visually painting for you just how boned they were going into this.
Yeah.
Because we have children.
Well, you panned the crowd, and the way that they start the battle here is that an old dude is so weak that he cannot keep his bow drawn, and he accidentally loses an arrow.
Yeah.
Oh, is that what happens there? I just thought he was trigger happy.
Nope,
I don't know.
Grandpa shaky.
Yeah, it takes a crap ton of strength to draw a bow. So I get it. And if it's not something you're used to, just random example, Legolas. If it's not something you're used to, I get, I don't think any of us could keep it drawn that long. But yeah, no, it definitely, it's not great. So thank God for the elves, right?
Although,
Yeah.
I mean, credit where credit's due. That old guy did get that shot. He got it right in the neck.
Yeah. So we open up and there's just dead silence as it pans around the scene, and it's so good at how it builds suspense. There's no music playing yet. You just are panning around, showing the Sauron's army is marching closer. We're panning across the top level of the castle, whatever thing. And
That's definitely what it's called.
Technical term.
we get a shot where there's a gap in two people. What's this? Oh, it's Gimli. He can't see, except he could if he moved over 2 feet where there's a break in the wall. And I love it so much. It's so good. And he's like, what's going on out there? And Legolas goes, shall I get you a box or describe it to you?
But like Gimli doesn't need to see. He's functionally only able to use an axe, and that won't come into play until you are already in a much worse scenario.
Yeah.
He just wants to know what's going on.
Couldn't he, like, in theory, like, just try to use a bow and arrow?
Yeah, why didn't
Probably
they...
better than Grandpa.
Or at least move him to a different... I know you have to have him be near Legolas, but at least move him to an area where his close-range combat will be used rather than waiting for things to go terribly for him to start doing anything. Because at first, he's just yelling.
I think the idea is when you are being laid siege upon, grammar, if you're in close range combat, you're already screwed. They're in.
Yeah.
That's the thing.
Yes,
it's
true.
like, you could be anywhere. They could get in anywhere. This is a siege.
They had like 6-year-olds throwing rocks at people. Surely Gimli could have done something.
I liked seeing the 6-year-olds throwing rocks at orcs and then also seeing Treebeard and company throwing rocks at Isengard. I was like, it's the same weapon.
I almost made a note that like, oh, come on, what are those rocks doing? But then we see it later happening where Merry and Pippin, and they actually like hit people with it and like knock them off their stands and stuff. So I was like, okay, well, you proved me wrong.
That's a callback to like the very first chapter of Fellowship, where it's like talking like the whole thing about hobbits, and like one of the things mentioned is that like any small animals in the Shire know to get under cover quick if you see a hobbit reaching for a rock, because they're really good shots with rocks.
Oh, so I missed that detail.
It's just a fun little Easter egg that they threw in Two Towers for, people who don't have lives.
I love that. And then we see, oh shoot, I need to look it up. We see Theoden is standing there, and then it starts to rain. So
Classic.
cool. And he says
The ASMR
it's
of
so
the rain
good.
hitting the armor is just so good. It's tension building. It replaces what is a stellar soundtrack in that moment. And also it leads to two very different sounds, where you've got like rain on actual armor on our good guys, which is kind of like it's almost soothing in the way that rain on like a tin roof is. And then you cut to the forces of Saruman, and it's this like squelchy, heavy, like mud sounds, and it somehow makes them sound dirty. You know what I mean?
ooh, yeah.
I love the contrast.
Something the film does really, really well is contrast. Like, we were just talking about, the little 6-year-olds and, like, these old grandpas, and then it'll kind of cut back and forth between them and the orcs, so you just see, like, all you can see is their armor and, like, their hot, gross breath, like, steaming out. They're kind of
I know exactly what you're talking about. There's like there's that one helmet that's just like, like, it's so gross. Like, what? You go to the doctor, you need an inhaler.
Wear a mask.
Wear a mask.
Exactly. And, like, in between the battle, like, when the battle first, like, kind of starts going, every once in a while you'll cut to the Entmoot, and it's just the Ents swaying quietly.
Yeah, here's an English word for all y'all listeners. The word is, well, wait, this is an English language podcast. What I meant is a literature word.
I was gonna say, I was like, what?
The word is juxtaposition,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
It means contrast, but for snobby book people. And the juxtaposition of the battle at Helm's Deep against the Entmoot, literally the most fastest paced thing against like the most slowest paced thing. It it's kind of like shocks you a little bit.
So then Theoden says, so it begins.
Thanks, Theoden.
And since this episode will be coming out, I think in December, I don't know what time is anymore because I'm recording these so far in advance now that I don't know what year it is.
No one likes a bragger.
Because we are still in a pandemic, your New Year's Eve plans better not include going out and partying. If you would like to ring in 2021 with Theoden saying, so it begins, you can start the extended edition at 9 p.m. or 9:13 and 19 seconds at night p.m. And right as it hits midnight, Theoden will say, so it begins. And for theatrical edition, you can start it at 9:46 p.m. and 11 seconds.
That sounds like a pretty dope way to do that, actually.
So that's everyone's New Year's Eve plans this year.
Yay!
Yeah, exactly.
Things I don't buy for 400, Alex, is that the Elvish prince just completely gives up control of his entire, like, battalion to Aragorn.
I was thinking that
Yeah.
too. Yeah, it's like, who are you? I guess he speaks the language at least, but
But, okay, I speak just enough French to tell people to fire. That doesn't mean that I get to take over the French troops should we go to war.
Well, I think, so that's Haldir, and he's, like, the captain of the guard in Lothlorien, and I think,
Yeah.
Galadriel was specifically like, just go help my future son-in-law. He's so lost.
yeah, I probably wouldn't have done that just from like a tactical standpoint. Like Aragorn is like a rogue right now, and these guys are like used to listening to me.
Also,
So it just seems like a weird choice.
we've established that elves have substantially better sight than their human counterparts. And
Yeah, but none of them are allowed to look over the ledge. That's Aragorn's job.
in a distance game, which is currently what we're playing, you would think that would be a usable advantage, but it's literally just it makes me sad every time. I'm like, it's just nonsense that they're just like...
Yeah, they're just trying to get Aragorn in the spotlight. Yeah.
Well,
Which, I like it. I like seeing a man in charge, but... doesn't make
And
any
also,
sense.
we just had this... We've spent all of Two Towers showing this tension between Aragorn and Theoden. I don't necessarily believe that Theoden all of a sudden would be like, yeah, Aragorn, you go ahead and lead half of the people. He says, last I checked, Theoden, not Aragorn, was king of Rohan.
There's a Game of Thrones quote that you don't know, Mary Clay, where it's like, crap, I'm gonna butcher it though. But it's like if you have to scream at everyone that you're the king, you're like not really the king.
But also,
Yeah.
Theoden is like the master of the royal we as a concept. Like, he fights this whole battle in armor from like a very far distance away.
Yeah.
He tries to do something once.
He gets army boo-boo. Gets his little arm hurt.
We're jumping ahead again. We do get our first instance of the Wilhelm scream as someone gets
it's
yeeted off a wall.
It is so jarring. The first time I watched this, I was legitimately like, was that actually the Wilhelm scream? Because I don't know if that's still a thing. Is that still a thing
yeah.
that they put into movies?
Yeah.
Modern movies? Because I haven't heard it in a movie that has come out in the last couple of years recently. Not that I can remember. It was just like very out of place to me. And like I laughed a lot and I appreciated it. And then if I recall, there's like 20 in Return of the King Wilhelm screams.
Are you guys talking about the yell from SpongeBob where he says, "My leg"? Is that what we're talking about?
That is the Wilhelm scream, yes.
So
Listeners, I will insert it here if you don't know what it is.
So the Wilhelm scream has long since been like just a inside joke between sound guys on films, and like people only really started tracking it or being aware of it once people started making YouTube compilations of them. So like in terms of a timeline, it's pretty recent that your average viewer has been like, that is what that is.
Oh, interesting.
Because prior to that, how would you have known?
I think that comes with the birth. Yeah, the birth of the internet. You can really talk about stuff.
Yeah.
That was such a stupid sentence out of my mouth.
I'm gonna leave it in. So then we also begin with this battle, the competition between Legolas and Gimli as they begin killing everyone, and it's so good. And I like how they did first of all, I like how this was something brought in from the book during this scene. Mm-hmm. It's a great way to have humor interjected throughout these very intense scenes.
Yeah.
Otherwise,
it's also like kind of the one time in the films that like Legolas feels like book Legolas to me. Like,
yes, the one true Legolas.
Yeah, like he I feel like Orlando Bloom, like he was a very new actor at the time. I think he started filming these when he was like 19. I think he
had just graduated from acting school.
He arrived in New Zealand on his 19th birthday.
Like, little baby,
yeah,
he
was a
him.
little boo-boo, and he didn't really know what he was doing yet.
And then your sidekick throughout the movie is John Rhys Davies. Can you imagine that? Dang.
I love Legolas so much. I know this is a family podcast, but let's say that Legolas is my preferred date from this movie. I think I would have a lot of fun.
Gimli is mine, and I would love a double date between me, you, Legolas, and Gimli.
So antagonistic.
I love it.
But
Oh my
so
gosh.
fun.
They just like race each other eating all of the tapas.
Oh, so good.
But like this is the one time that Legolas really feels like the fun jock from the books.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. I hadn't really thought about that. Yeah, he's very movie Legolas is very serious and very
Really
ominous.
spacey in a way that like
He's always like staring off into the distance with his elf
Yeah.
eyes.
Book Legolas is like really connected to the earth in a way that feels convincing, but like Orlando Bloom just doesn't quite execute that. He like gazes into the distance and is like, a red sun rises, and it's like, you're not saying anything real right now. Like, I don't know.
You know, it's weird because like Orlando Bloom in real life is actually like a very jovial person, and from a lot of the behind the scenes stuff I've watched, Orlando Bloom and Viggo Mortensen had a thing where they would joke about like, oh, like, Viggo Mortensen would be like, elves, they're fragile creatures, they're so whatever, little waif of a thing, and like and Orlando Bloom makes fun of, you know, men, and it's like he's just jealous because my bow is bigger than his, and like that, if they had, it would have been fun for, again, that I guess that comes down also to the script, the screenwriters writing that kind of stuff in, but they have that like fun back and forth that I've brought it up a couple times during Fellowship. There's the scene when they're on the mountains and Legolas is walking over the snow. I'm pretty sure he laughs at everyone
it's
else.
so funny.
Yeah.
That's a good Legolas moment too. That's
Yeah.
like a true Legolas spirit. You guys got to trudge. My people haven't been trudging for thousands of years.
Sucks to
like-
suck, mortals.
Men. My last note on this part of the battle before we move to the next scene is that so all these ladders, they keep being pushed up to the top, and I think you see it happen twice where they just push the ladders over. Just keep doing that. Just keep pushing the ladders over.
What they really need, and I feel like castles must have had something like it's like the wall is so thick, they really need like a de-laddering device, and what that means is like a branch with like a knock at the end so they can just like, because if you're leaning out far enough to like push, you're gonna fall. But what you need like a one of those trash grabby things to just like
I know
yeet
what you mean,
that
yeah.
ladder off the wall.
But it seems like this is new technology. Everyone's like generally shocked when in the
ladders.
first 2 minutes of the battle, they're like, oh, we're already over the wall. Because they were like, we were expecting you to have to climb this on grappling hooks. Like, how did you think of a ladder?
Oh my god, I kept thinking of the ancient Greek siege tower. Haley, do you know what it's called? Do you know what I'm talking about?
I don't know the Greek name for it.
It's called like the Helopolis. This is the kind of war where one of those would roll up and it would be like, oh no. It's literally like 20-story tall siege tower that people are fighting from inside and like shooting arrows and murdering and sieging and stuff.
In general, this battle seems to be the equivalent of like the old wives' tale where like they say that when like Nazi Germany rolled into Poland, the Polish cavalry ran out and the German soldiers reported hearing the sounds of swords against the outside of their tanks. You know what I mean? And like
I just got a chill.
that is the vibe of this, where it's just like Sauron's forces rolled up with like ladders, double wide ladders, bombs out of nowhere.
More ladders.
Crossbow, like just everything.
So
they've
many
got all the technology, and it's
well,
literally
and they
like,
also have like just like more resources in general. Every person has armor that every orc has armor that fits them, and they all have weapons that they're trained in, and they were like born for this. And it's just much better.
Yeah,
prepared.
meanwhile, they're like, 8-year-old, take this helmet that previously fit an adult man and
Who died
throw
in
some
it.
rocks.
Well,
Yeah.
the other thing is that, like, okay, Rohan's thing is horses. Nothing is worse for horses than a intentional siege draw scenario where they're like, well, we'll hole up here and wait for them.
It all comes down to Theoden being dumb and not listening to Aragorn or Gandalf moments after he was unpossessed by Saruman.
Yeah, we call that possession hangover. Not thinking clearly.
And then one more thing on this scene, actually. The only reason they had the rain in this scene is so that they could get Aragorn wet again.
Yeah.
Ooh,
I'm not opposed.
Let's get everybody wet. Get Aragorn
They're
wet.
like, shoot, he's already dried off from his time in the river. How do we get him wet again?
He needs another soak.
Rain.
They're like, we can't just straight up oil him, but like, let's.
That's fair,
How
Mir.
close can we get?
So now we cut to the Ent Moot, which I love the Ents. I love them. I love the use of sound in these scenes, and you hear the like groaning of the trees, and it's so it is taking a pause and a break and resting from the battle for a bit. Treebeard comes over and says, "We have agreed." And there's this really long pause. Mary's like, "Yeah? And he says, "You are not orcs." And Mary is pissed. He's like, "You've been talking for half a day and you just decided you can trust us? Well, what about the war?" Yeah, he says, "Don't be hasty." And this is what I wanted the Ent scenes to be like the entire time we've been with them in Two Towers. Because this is their essence. Treebeard's catchphrase is "Don't be hasty." And he says it, 2.5 hours into the movie. I wish that this part, that they had like captured this part of their characters in the other scenes that they had already shown during the rest of the movie.
I also love here just how happy Treebeard is when he announces that they're not orcs. He's like, "We've decided you aren't orcs." And he gives them this face that is like, ta-da! Like, we did it!
No, I think they really captured the essence of Treebeard in that they captured the essence of J.R.R. Tolkien making fun of his best friend. Because, again, for everyone who's not aware, Treebeard was based on C.S. Lewis, and the professor in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe is based on Tolkien.
Oh, I love it. I love it.
Mary and Treebeard in this scene are like me trying to get my husband out the door when we're running late for dinner with friends. It's just like, oh my God, how are you still tying your shoes, dude? Like, we're on phase 2, okay? We gotta go.
Yeah, and then Mary is like, "Well, what about the war?" And he's like, "Well, and the war?" And they're like, "Okay, we'll talk about that next and get back to you in a jiff."
Well, and don't we get like a brief moment where he's like, "It takes a really long time to say things in Old Entish, so we have to be really sure that we want to talk about it before we launch into that."
Yeah, because that's the whole reason why the Ents are slow moving, because their philosophy is that if you're going to talk about things, even the words that you say, they have to be worth saying. They have to carry meaning and value with them. So, and they don't like to, don't be hasty. They don't like short words. They like the beauty of long words.
That is such a... Tolkien's like, what if there was a race that cared so much about, like, the words they were using? What if it's, like, the speaking is, like, their culture, and they just, like, take their time, and it's just, like, all about words?
I, like, kind of did that with the elves, but that was mostly singing. I want to really get in. I want to really, really, really focus on language.
Well, in terms of hearing Entish in this movie, when we hear them conversing, it is just incredible because you're hearing basically the sounds of creaking wood and like wind awesome. In leaves, but it's also immediately apparent that you are listening to a conversation of some sort somehow.
That's one of those things that's like most of these movies and books, I'm like not really for children, but that's one of those things where it's like go home to your house and like listen out your window and it's like there's Ents out there, dude, and they're talking to each other.
Yeah, I fully believe that they're Ents just waiting for two hobbits to move them to action.
Convince them to take revenge.
Exactly. And then we, again, another moment of, oh, this is a nice Ent scene. We're finally progressing with their plot. Oh, and we're back to Helm's Deep. Oh, okay. I see what we did there. And we cut back with more of the battle, and Gimli is going 17, 18, 19. And I think Legolas says, "You're behind. I've got 27 already."
It occurred to me that they have to at some point, when they stop counting in the theatrical edition, it's because they keep counting in the extended edition, and they can't keep counting in the theatrical edition after that because the numbers get out of order.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
It's like when they keep count. I was thinking about the spoiler alert for the extended edition. I was thinking about the Oliphant, right, which I think is an extended edition thing, and I was like, oh, they had to stop counting in the theatrical edition because otherwise it would have skipped all the way up to like 50, and then it's like, whoa, what?
I'll be honest, I probably wouldn't have paid attention that closely anyway.
Neither.
So.
We get a beautiful moment of unity, however, as we all get to watch the Olympic torch get brought in.
So stupid.
Okay, well, hang on. Well, first, we have Theoden jinxing us.
Oh, yeah.
Why
He
is he
says-
like this?
He's like, ha, is that all you can bring, Saruman?
Like, why even say that out loud? Like, what? Literally, it's the worst thing.
And then we cut to this goblin orc person doing the Olympic torch. I'm so glad you brought that up.
That's an Uruk-hai because they don't go down with
Uruk-hai.
arrows.
Okay.
The only thing that could have made that scene worse is if it was stormtrooper status can't even hit them. But no, they hit that guy. He just will not go
No,
down.
yeah, Aragorn says, Legolas, like, take him down. So point number one, if it's so important to take this one guy down, just tell that to everyone who has a bow in it. Like, shoot for this one guy. Don't just single out Legolas. Get everyone to shoot him. And second, Legolas, I do not believe for a second that Legolas couldn't have headshotted him and taken him out, because you show him taking out this goblin in Helm's Deep, in Moria, when there's basically no light and they're way far away. I do not believe for a second that Legolas couldn't take him out. And instead, Legolas pulls 2 arrows. Orlando Bloom is really working his best eyebrow acting as he's doing this. And shoots him twice, like in the shoulder and the arm. And I'm like, really? Not the head or the neck?
I don't have any answers for you regarding Legolas because that was dumb, objectively. But in terms of making it super obvious what the Uruk-hai in question was doing, let us all keep in mind that Saruman is a wizard. And wizards, as we've established very well on the restricted section, are all about the drama.
Yeah, you know what they could have done is sent the smallest orc in there with a flint.
Nope. The biggest
They
one,
don't know how to use that.
Sparking torch, absolutely necessary.
They clear a path for him, and they're all just kind of like cheering him on as he finishes his marathon, man. Like,
Suicide mission, yes.
everyone's super into it, and then at the very last minute, he decides to go for a full belly flop to just finish it off.
Dives into it, yeah. So he dives into the storm drain where someone had previously placed a bomb, and the whole thing is blown up.
The whole wall. When you said thing, it was the whole wall. That's
The
what
whole
that
wall.
thing is.
That's what I meant. What did I say earlier?
You just said the whole thing. Oh, yeah.
The level
Like the
castle
level
thing.
tier thing of rocks, that's before the other one.
Yeah.
I think the technical term is curtain wall.
Okay, getting fancy on us.
Rock chunks just go like flying, and the rock chunks in and of themselves probably take out another 100 or so
Yeah.
of the enemy
Yeah, that does
forces.
some damage. Oh, yeah.
This shot was achieved by blowing up the miniatures of Helm's Deep.
I was just about to say, it reminded me of when I was in elementary school and I built an Egyptian pyramid out of sugar cubes. Like, that's kind of what it reminded me of.
And then, I mean, a lot of the trivia about Two Towers is about Helm's Deep. Another one is that they filmed Helm's Deep, they edited it down from 20 hours of footage, shot over a 4-month period. 3 of those months were at night, and 1 of the months was filmed during the day. That was the shooting of Helm's Deep.
Oh my god.
It's like a way of life. That's all I've ever known is war.
Crazy. It all gets blown up. It does look very cool. We have this shot of Theoden being like, oh, Shire.
Yeah, you jinxed
Oh, yeah,
it.
you said it. Yeah, I was like screaming at the TV. I was like, you did this to us.
Gimli, at one point, Gimli comes to help out Aragorn, and he is such a Gryffindor, and I love it. He just like cannonballs. Also, this happens multiple times throughout this battle, where people will just like body surf or cannonball on top of a crowd of orcs that have spears, and I'm like, how did you not get impaled at all? But okay, whatever. Yeah, like cannonballs on top of a bunch of orcs to help out Aragorn. Love that. And then we get the iconic shield surfing moment.
The surf and slay.
Yeah.
The Legolas trademark surf and slay.
So good.
Legolas picks up his shield and flings it like he's skimboarding on the beach. And jumps
exactly
on top
like that.
and surfs down the stairs while firing his arrows into the crowd. And I think we have this very brief moment of ba ba da 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 da.
I mean, you do have to keep in mind this was what, 2002, so like it's not that far out of the 90s. Like there was definitely like someone in the writing room who was like, well, we have to include some kind of like surfboarding thing for the kids.
Oh, this was peak Tony Hawk time.
Oh yeah.
Also, Orlando Bloom, they were like, yeah, he does his own stunts, so...
Well, and they also, it's like, okay, this whole series is like 12 hours of film, and they have to keep coming up with cool new ways for him to shoot his bow.
Yeah, this is true. Yeah.
What do? Put him on a horse, put him on a skateboard, put him upside down, put him on an elephant, put him on a mountain, put him in a tree.
Yeah, exactly.
Have him do two at the same time.
Good point. However, so yes, this is very cool. Dumbledore. However, it's very corny and kind of dumb. I'm just going to say that.
No, for sure. I mean, okay, let's put it this way. I think that you could watch this movie and know what year it was made.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah. It is very of the times.
So,
exactly.
For what it's worth, watching this as a youth, I remember seeing that and being like, that's so cool. Oh my God. Like, went to
It's pretty cool. It's pretty cheesy and pretty cool. I mean, have you guys ever played Tony Hawk? Okay.
Like, imagine being a 13-year-old boy watching this movie back when it came out. It's the coolest thing you've ever seen. It is exactly what you would hope that a video game would allow you to do with your character.
Yeah, for sure.
That's a good way of putting
it. Also, just while we're talking about it, Tony Hawk, those games are great, but there's also the extremely goofy skateboarding games, which were pretty cool too. It's pretty similar mechanics, but not quite as like trying to say something. You know, it's like just being goofy.
And then if you want a video game where you can shield surf, Zelda Breath of the Wild.
Ooh, yeah.
There you go.
So did they take that from Lord of the Rings?
I'm positive that someone was watching because they've been developing Zelda Breath of the Wild for 50 years, I think, or they were.
I was gonna say, like,
out now, but
even if they stole that from Lord of the Rings, it's like they produced so much of that world on their own. Like, you're good.
But I like thinking that they did this as a fun, because people who enjoy Lord of the Rings and people who play Breath of the Wild are most likely one circle, you know? So I'm sure that people who enjoy shield surfing in Breath of the Wild are like, this is a fun nod to an unrelated fantasy series.
Honestly, as a writer, I do that kind of stuff all the time in my own writing, where I'm like, some nerd will think this is hilarious.
Yeah, exactly.
And that nerd is me, the author.
Then we cut back to the Entmoot again.
Entmoot! I feel like we need like a
boys' night a la Magic Tavern.
That wasn't on purpose, but yes.
Entmoot!
You get a nice little bit of the Shire theme here, which is just so precious.
Yeah, it is lovely.
So yeah, Treebeard has revealed that their decision is to not go to war. He says that the Ents will keep on doing what they've been doing, which is not getting involved. They are Poland? No, Switzerland? Not Poland.
Switzerland.
That was not the right answer.
It's
at
cool.
all.
We've brought up Poland once. That's confusing.
To Poland's credit, it never chose to be involved.
Yeah, that's true. They are going to Switzerland this to the end of the times, and whether they die, that's okay with them because they're Ents and they'll just keep on keeping on, dude.
Wait, I can connect this to Poland. There's a Polish, what's the thing? Like an old Polish saying, "Not my circus, not my monk."
Oh yeah.
And that's what the Ents are doing.
Yeah, Christina, I'm gonna be honest. When you were like, "I'm gonna connect this to Poland," I was like, "Oh no, what's gonna happen? It's gonna be dumb. It's gonna be 5 minutes later."
We do get like a really nice moment here because Pippin and Mary start talking, and Pippin's kind of trying to convince Mary to just like give it up, turn it in. He's like, "We'll go back to the Shire. It'll be great." And we get this little movie nod to like the scouring of the Shire that we
Yes.
Where he's like describing basically all the things that did come to pass in the books, in terms of the war actually like taking out a good portion of the Shire, which I just like.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
in my notes I have like, oh, Merry's a Ravenclaw, like, because he kind of is here. Like, up till now, we've kind of seen him as, like, a little playmate with Pippin. Like, they're just kind of, like, kids on this adventure. And, like, Pippin is still kind of there, like, yay, we're going on an adventure. This is so much fun. And, like, Merry, this is the moment where we realize, like, oh, Merry recognizes the stakes here. Like, he knows what's up. He knows that this is not going to leave anyone untouched.
So, well, hang on real quick. So, yeah, Treebeard says they're not going to get involved and tells the hobbits that their part in this adventure is over and that they would be better off going to the Shire. And so that's what happens. Pippin's like, well, at least we still love the Shire. And I'm like, no, you don't, because it's currently up in flames, except not in your universe. Oh, and then also, I think Pippin says, this is too big for us. And I just wanted to go in there and scream and be like, didn't you hear Galadriel say that even the smallest person can change the course of the future? Just like that aggressively.
Yeah, it is. It's like the first time that the hobbitses are like on their own. And so it's like, they're like kind of looking around for an adult and they're like, oh God,
We
my
are
God,
the
it's
adults.
us. Yeah.
It's very relatable.
And then, yeah, they're like, freaking Treebeard is like, go back to the Shire. And I feel like Treebeard in his brain is like, that's really far away and you'll be safe. I've been in Fangorn for so long and like nothing has ever touched me here. And I think it's, not to go ahead too much, but like when he sees, I keep calling it the scar because that's what they call it in the Avatar episode where the same thing happens.
Yeah.
But like
the
where
forest is burned.
the burned forest, and he's like, oh wait, they can go in Fangorn. They can go anywhere they want to. We gotta stop
Not
them.
to make it like too much of like a thing, but it being current day, Treebeard is just like the perfect example of someone that doesn't believe that COVID exists until their uncle dies of COVID. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So that analogy pains me because that is accurate for movie Treebeard. Book Treebeard knows everything that has been going on. And you don't have to have this moment. He doesn't say, the Ints don't say, no, we're not going to go to war. They come back from the Int Moot and they say, yeah, we're going to go to war. Let's go, hobbits. And they all start marching together. And Treebeard is aware of what Saruman has been doing because he is so connected to the forest and the earth that he can feel it, and it pains him to feel this loss. So that makes me very sad to see that they made Treebeard a lot more. So here's like what they had to do here in order to elevate Merry and Pippin's role in this story and make them more active is they had to make Treebeard a lot more passive, and they had to make it so that Merry and Pippin come in and they change his mind and they do something to get him to act rather than them just being there and kind of explaining what's going on in the outside world and Treebeard being like, oh, that sounds serious, let's have an Int Moot, okay, we're gonna go to war, is what I recall happening.
Well, and it also just that's one of those things where the translation from book to film, it's like you have to have things happening. You can't be like, let's talk about how Treebeard can feel this in his roots and like how you know what I mean? It's like let's show everything that's happening. And I think that just screenwriters are really willing to sacrifice character for plot, which is like so sad. You see it happen constantly. Jenny Weasley.
And then also in this scene, I just love how Merry is he's so passionate about this, and he's very mad at Treebeard, and he's explaining to Pippin, like, no, you don't get it. This is very serious. Like, this is going to, if we don't do something, the Shire isn't going to be safe. Everything you know will be gone. You don't get it. We can't ever go back to the way it was. And now we're left with no other choice because there's nothing else for us to do here. And he's very upset and sad. And meanwhile, Pippin is just trying so hard to like be there for his friend, and he's trying to comfort him. That's why he's saying things like, this is too big for us. We still have the Shire. We can go home. And he's just trying to be there for Merry and comfort him. But in this scene, you see this realization kind of coming on Pippin as Merry is explaining everything to him. And then, yeah, as Brooke said earlier, we have concerning hobbits coming in the background, which It's concerning hobbits, but they made it sadder. It's just a knife to the heart.
Yep. No, Mary in this moment is like a millennial having their like climate change apocalypse anxiety for the first time. Like you know when it hits you really hard.
Going on to this metaphor, Mary is a depressed millennial who is aware of the state of the world and is explaining it to Pippin, Gen Z. And Pippin is the one who, instead of being like weighed down by this, he is energized and is like, I've got an idea for how we can save this. But that doesn't come till later.
Sweet. So
My boys.
optimistic.
This is where we are going to leave this week's episode. So, as I correctly assumed, it was going to be chaotic times with me, Haley, Brook, and Christina, and also talking about Helm's Deep, which is the most chaotic part of Two Towers. And we recorded for 2.5 hours, more than 2.5 hours. That's right. We recorded as long as Fellowship of the Ring is a movie. So I have split that into 2 parts. So the next part of the conversation will come out next week. I figured no one would complain about having another week of Two Towers discussion, since it seems that universally people seem to love Two Towers the most. So we will do that next week. And then the week after that, we will be doing Extended Edition. As I'm recording this outro right now, I have watched Disc 1 of Two Towers Extended. So far, my review is, you should have kept all the int stuff. Everything else can go. We'll see what happens on Disc 2. That's What I'm Talking About is a proud member of WBNE. You can learn more about the network by going to WBNE.org, where you will find all of our other shows like Sincerely Us, which I will be on in the coming future for the annual Star Kid holiday extravaganza. We're covering Starship this holiday season. Your favorite Christmas classic. Anyway, here's a trailer for Sincerely Us.
Hi, I'm Eni.
And I'm Becca.
And we host the casual musical theater podcast Sincerely Us.
We break down all the themes, motifs, and plot lines of your favorite musicals while also having fun and sharing our love for the craft.
We cover new shows, old shows, popular shows, and everything in between.
Everything from Hamilton all the way back to She Loves Me and beyond.
We keep things light, explain in detail, and try to make the topic of musical theater accessible to everyone.
So whether you've been into theater your entire life,
or have just gotten into it after seeing Hamilton,
this is the show for you.
With new episodes every Wednesday on WBNE.org or wherever you get your podcasts, and now on Spotify.
The cover is by Graphite, aka Vaishon Brandon. You can support him on Instagram at graphite.vmb. You can find the podcast on Twitter and Instagram at TolkienAboutPod, and you can also join the Facebook group, which is linked in the description. You can find me on Twitter at MCWattsUp and Instagram at MCTurnedDownForWatt. You can become a patron and support the podcast by going to patreon.com/TolkienAboutPod. And this week's sponsor is Mott's. Mott's, thank you, as always, for your support. You can also become a $3 patron and join our Discord, where you will join the WBNE community, as well as a thread for That's What I'm Talking About. And I'm planning to do some kind of a virtual game night hangout sesh, whatever, at some point this month. Possibly a Kahoot, I believe is what the kids call it these days. I don't know what Kahoot is, but I've been told that you could do that virtually. So that might be fun. And I'm going to try to do that with my patrons this month. And that information will be ever evolving in Discord. So you should go to patreon.com/TolkienAboutPod now to get access to that tier. Now, unfortunately, the highly rated segment Is Viggo Mortensen Actually a Ranger was recorded in the part that will be in next week's episode. So I will close out this episode with this week's Is Viggo Mortensen Actually a Ranger? Viggo Mortensen is trilingual in English, Spanish, and Danish, and requested the script to be revised to let Aragorn speak more of his lines in Elvish. He is Aragorn, oh my god. And that's what I'm talking about. Just spitballing here, but it might be that all of the Shire's nature is destroyed, everyone is forced to export their weed and crops, leaving nothing for themselves, and a corrupt police force takes over until the hobbits return to... Oh my god. Oh my god, I literally stopped breathing during that. Oh my god.